Well, welcome to the Love LKN podcast. I'm Phil. This is Jerel. Normally, this is a podcast that we use, and it goes up during the week. This is our message content. You get our messages from Sunday, but Jerel and myself, we both have creative projects coming out in the next month, and so we wanted to create a special episode where we were able to talk about our projects. And in this episode specifically, I get to interview Jerel about his project. I think a lot of people know this, but some may not, that Jerel is an author as well as a talented speaker and teacher and pastor. As a matter of fact, my daughter's a big fan of Jerel's books. And so I want to take this podcast and ask you some questions about your writing and your new project coming out, and kind of get in your head as to why you do this and what your process is like.
I wanted to communicate some spiritual truth, like some things that are true to them. I wanted to communicate to my kids. And so that started this series that I wrote starting in like 2009, 2010, that became a series called the Jonah Stone, Son of Angels series, where there's like 5 books in this book series that I ended up, the whole story about getting a publisher in there that was kind of amazing. It was a total God story where I was able to publish these books. And I do remember the first time I wrote the first manuscript, and I gave it to Bailey and Christopher, who were around 10 and 8 at the time. I remember Christopher coming downstairs and he had read it in like 3 nights or something, and he just comes down the steps and he's like, "Dad, this is awesome." And I just remember kind of melting, going, that's the only thing I cared about at that moment. Was I haven't had any success in publishing this thing, but my success was measured at that moment in whether it connected with my kids. And that's all I really cared about. And then the crazy thing was letting go of that idea of what could be successful. Then God just chose, for whatever reason, to put me into, I just crossed paths with somebody who helped me get it in front of what's Thomas Nelson, which is now connected with HarperCollins publishers. And that was the beginning of that series. And so I've kept writing since then. And I feel like, okay, it's a creative outlet for me, and it's fun. It's also something I feel like I've got some element of gifting in, but it also allows me to communicate some things that I think are true, even though it's wrapped up in a fictional story. And there are a lot of people out there who will say, "Gosh, the best fiction is like truth wrapped up in a lie, or truth wrapped up in like things that aren't a story that's not true, but it gets at the deeper meaning of things."
Like, even with what I do when I'm writing and I'm in some part of the house and I may not have all of it worked out, but I've got some element of a song and I've got a melody, and maybe I've put it down and I'm doing something else in the middle of the day, and I hear one of my kids singing it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the greatest feeling ever.
Yeah.
It's like, one, it makes me think I'm onto something, and maybe I should finish this.
Yeah. Right.
And because I think when you're writing anything, if it gets stuck in your head, if something gets stuck in your head and you just can't get it out, that's good. And to have your kids' seal of approval on whatever your creative endeavor is, it's pretty awesome.
Do you find that it's hard to finish when you start something creative? Like, because I find with writing, and I think I've gotten to a better place with it, where I'm like, if I start it, I'm going to finish this story. But I think at the beginning, it was harder to finish. It was like I could start it, but I found it like, so there's so much discipline in finishing a project.
When I was younger, it was a lot easier to just sit down and write something all the way through.
Huh.
But now I have to schedule time with myself to do it. So if I've started something, that's the more organic moment.
Yeah.
But
because of busyness?
Because of busyness,
or your brain is
I'm not as quick. Yeah, my brain is deteriorating.
Because you're so old.
Yeah, maybe. What could possibly distract me? I have 2 girls, but
exactly.
Yeah. But now it's, if I can just If I can just start something and get to like if I can get the first verse and chorus, I feel pretty good. So is that like the way it's like when you write, when you're writing something, do you have to finish something to where you know it, like you've got a chapter done, or you've got an element of the story done, you can stop and then come back to it?
That's a good question. I think that like my process when I'm really writing is that I'm trying to do 3 pages a day for a period of time, you know? So if I'm really in it and I'm like, all right, I want to write pretty, like my goal is to write fast because I feel like I'm going to lose the story if I don't, if that makes any sense. So I want to write a first draft in maybe like 3 months or 4 months because it feels like if it takes longer than that, then I lose the momentum. Like I lose the story. And so roughly 3 pages a day for like 5 days a week would be a goal for me. So it's not necessarily about on each of those days coming to a stopping point. Some days it's like the middle of a paragraph that I stop and I literally am like, my goal is to get to 3 pages as hard as it might be today. Or even if it feels like it's bad, I'm just trying to get I'm trying to hit the number in a way. And what I'm trusting in that is that in the process of creating something, that something good's going to happen in the middle of it. Like God's going to show up in some ways that I'm not prepared, you know, I couldn't prepare for ahead of time. And like in the middle of the writing, often what happens with me is that the inspiration to write happens after I start. And so I don't know if that's the same with songwriting or not. Like I feel like you might have to have you definitely have a nugget of an idea. Like I think with fiction writing, it's definitely, there's an idea that the book starts with, and it's got to be more than just one simple idea. Like the idea of this book, this latest book that's coming out soon is that this kid lives in this sort of near future world. It's it's a dystopian world, and it's like very controlled by this group of leaders, and they're wanting everybody to do the same thing at the same time. And so anything out of the ordinary is really against the law and is stamped out. He starts to discover that he can, when he dreams at night, he can affect reality. And so the idea really was kind of out of this, like, what if your dreams could really come true? It started as that idea, but it had to become more than just an idea. Like it had to get fleshed out into a story and characters and people. And but when I write, it's not like I kind of have, when I started it, probably I knew the first 8 to 10 chapters, and then I kind of knew how I wanted it to end. But between those 8 and 10 chapters and the ending was kind of like, let's see where this goes and see if there's anything good here.
So tell us all the name of the book.
Okay, yeah, it's called Evan Miller is Waking Down.
Evan Miller is Waking Down.
Yeah.
So did you name it before you started? I'm always curious about people's creative process.
No.
Did the name come to you after you'd finished the book? At what point?
It was for I think a long time. It was just called book number 5 or something like that. Like I think I didn't have a title.
Yeah.
I didn't have a title. The final title came much later. And right now I'm sitting here, I can't even remember what the title on the interim was because it changed to something else. But ultimately, I didn't feel like we had a great title, and went back and forth with the publisher after they read it, and there were a lot of ideas we started to throw around. And there's this concept in the book where they start to talk about, well, when there are these people that they discover can affect reality with their dreams, and they begin to call that, instead of waking up, they begin to call that waking down. Like they're going into a dream to affect, to do some things, to sort of subvert the system.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how I still have questions about process. How long did it take you to create, like from start to finish? Inception of the idea, beginning, fleshing it out, putting words on the page. How long did it take you before you finished? Like you said, this is done.
Like done,
Mm-hmm.
like done. This one was different because it was a lot longer than some of the previous ones, because I started writing the actual content for this book probably 10 years ago. definitely 10 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. And I wrote 75 pages or so, and then nothing was happening with it, and some other things were happening in life that the publisher I wasn't sure my publisher wanted it either, and that didn't help things. And so I kind of put it down and kept coming back to it and picking at it. And I really, until maybe 2.5 years ago was when I picked it back up and was like, there's something still here, the nugget of this idea. And so I went back into it and began to like figure it out and get back into it. It was very hard to jump back into, so almost like emotionally where I was with the book early on, because it felt like a relic. It felt like this thing from the past that I had to dig back up and like discover again. And did I care enough about it to write it, right? Like, did I care enough about, because it, with writing, it just takes effort, and it takes like, you got to put your heart into it.
It's emotional.
It's emotional, and you better not like do it unless you're invested and you feel like this is in my heart. I have to say something. But I did kind of find that. And so what I would say, like, typically would be 9 to 12 months would be the process for that.
Okay.
But this was a lot longer. Yeah.
It takes, I've had situations like that where it took me literally years. And you start something and you put it down, and it's almost like you have to have somebody sometimes to just walk in the room or pick up your manuscript, or ask you about an idea and say, hey, whatever happened to this idea? Or maybe you're fooling around, like for me, fooling around on a piano or guitar and singing something, and maybe my wife just walks through the room and says, that's good, you should finish that.
Yeah.
And it's just having someone to believe in you.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was going to ask you. I know you're supposed to be asking me questions, but so do you stop? Why do you stop before you finish it? Like, is it I just lose it, or I lose the idea, or is it like the inner critic kind of going, this is bad, or I don't think this is worth finishing? Is there, what is it that causes you at times to like stop?
Yes. All of
those things.
Yeah. it just depends. Sometimes you have a idea that you're in the moment and you've got a melody, you just got to get it down. And I have a phone full of voice memos, where it's just maybe a little melodic idea, or I have a notebook full of, pages with a few lyrics, maybe a lyric here, a lyric there. I have some pages with just the name of a song on it, and I've not written the song, but I know I want to at that point. Yeah. And sometimes it's like just committing to the fact that I'm going to put it to paper means I'm going to try to come back and finish it. And it's just a matter of scheduling time. So you have the initial creative moment or inspiration, and sometimes maybe you only have 15 minutes before you got to go do something. We're grown-ups now. Like, it's not like it used to be. You have obligations, so you have to find that time and chisel it out to really see an idea through. And the older I get, the more I know it's important to schedule that time with myself.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, that whole the creative process. Stephen King has an amazing book called On Writing. It's on writing, and I think it's one of the best books about writing. But he basically says a lot of things in there. But one of the things he says is that he talks about the difference between writing with the door closed versus writing with the door open. And what he's meaning is, when you write with the door closed, you're basically trying to write fast enough to stay ahead of your inner critic. And because we've all got that inner voice that wants to tell us that it sucks, or that it's bad. And I think creatives deal with that so often, where we just question everything. And his idea with the door shut is that I'm not letting anyone else see this. I'm not ready yet to open up the door, and I'm also gonna keep it away, keep my critic away from it, so I can actually get this idea out. And then it's like, okay, at some point you open the door, and that's when you share the song with Rachel, your wife, or I share the book with Liz or my kids. Yeah. And then, because there is a moment where they have sacrificed all this time for you to do this. And so they deserve the moment of like, can I see what you've done? But anyway, there's just that whole critic I think we have with ourselves that I've definitely fought a lot of battles with to even finish something. Yeah.
Well, this one's, you did it. You finished.
Yeah,
so,
finished.
Like, I have a question about like genre. What would you What do you classify? Where do you fall as
Yeah.
far as like your books? Where do they lie in the
they're all. I mean,
literary
these are
world?
all called middle grade fiction, which is really hits in the anywhere in the like 8 to 14-year-old. I mean, this one is a little more like a little older in that, but same category. So middle grade would be underneath YA, young adult fiction, which is more like in the high school range. But this would be in the 10 to 14-year-old kind of range. Although kids younger and older can definitely read it, and I hope they do. But it's really in that wheelhouse, and that's, I don't know, that's where I started with the first series, and it's kind of where I kept this, and maybe it's the audience I feel like I can communicate with the best, like it's on my level, but I'm also like, okay, they're a challenge because you got to keep their attention, really, really, really well, and so yeah, and this one is considered dystopian, which is like sort of near future. Crazy things happening in the world, action, adventure.
Do you keep that audience in mind as you're writing? Thinking, I've got a 14-year-old that's going to read this.
Yeah, I better. I mean, yes. Yeah, and that's, there are times where you veer away from that, and that's where the editors have been great at saying, hey, this, rewrite this, or make sure you're thinking about your audience. Because yes, and I feel like every page needs to be able to be turned, because it's almost like a competition. I don't want them to be able to put the book down, and so I want every page to be meaningful enough and significant enough that they're like, I gotta keep turning. Sometimes I'll talk to kids who are reading the books, and I'm like, where did you stop? Where did you stop reading? And I just want to know. I've asked that to actually Scarlett before, because she's read, your daughter's read some of these books.
Yeah.
And it's just always interesting for me to know where you could put the book down. But yeah, keeping the audience in front of me is definitely
and being
important.
a pastor, being a Christian.
Yeah.
Where does that?
Yeah.
How does that influence your writing, and is that included in this book in particular? I know it has been in the other ones.
Yeah, it has been. It's a great question, because it has been in the past for sure, and it is now. I mean, this is considered Christian fiction. The other ones I would say were more like the first series, the Jonah Stone series, were much more explicit, like in your face, because it was about like spiritual warfare.
I remember Scarlett going through her Bible thinking, I've got to find, where's this Leviathan? Where is,
like biblical creatures coming into play, and like I was trying to pull some things forward into modern day, and that was really fun. And just because of the idea behind the book was about the Nephilim, and back in Genesis, and what if your neighbor was a part angel, and so it just the content was just in your face, which is funny. Like in the previous fiction I'd done, I'd kind of avoided the very, very direct stuff, but that's when I forgot all that and just wrote that story.
Yeah.
This is because this one is sort of futuristic. It's almost more like an allegory of sorts, and so it's not as explicit in terms of biblical, I mean direct things from the Bible. But what I would say is that there's biblical themes throughout it, and so I'm always aware of like, it's the balance. Like I'm not trying to teach something when I'm writing. I'm not trying to it's not like a Sunday message, where I'm preparing a message and trying to hit these 3 points. What I'm hoping is that I got a story that I hope God inspired, that I want to tell, and what I'm also trusting is that He's gonna bring some things out that He wants to see happen in there. And so I think there's themes in this book of dreaming dreams, and what you care about, what you're passionate about, and your gifting, like your giftedness is really important, and God gave it to you, and you shouldn't let anybody else try to squelch that. And then this idea of pursuing real truth, like what's really happening, what's really true, and we want to be about that, as opposed to some false ideas that people kind of put on us.
So when you're writing, I mean, how much from your real life do you put into a book? Or how about in this one?
Yeah. This one, I mean, I think is always about, do you feel that way? Like with your writing, it's always about your real life in a way. I mean, like there's always things that connect.
I think so. I mean, sometimes you definitely put yourself as a character. Like Rachel and I were talking about this the other day with Brandon Flowers from The Killers. He's a Mormon, and you think of that as they abide by a certain, way of life. But with his lyrics, it's almost like he's playing a character in each song.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yeah.
and I think sometimes that,
and even when he sings, right? Would you say that on stage too?
Yeah.
Sometimes? Yeah.
And so I think that
It's like Bono.
with creative endeavors, it's important to be able to wear different hats. Some people are really great at speaking in the first person or whatever, but sometimes you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes to get something done.
Yeah.
And so I just wondered in this book, is there,
Yeah.
I mean,
I wouldn't say there's characters that like are exactly like people that I know, but
am I in this book?
there's a worship leader who's kind of strange. He does really weird
He's
stuff.
incredibly good looking.
Yes.
Has a really high voice.
So yeah, now that I think about it, all right. So Liz and I have a couple of goddaughters, and there is a character in this book who reminds me of Maya, our older goddaughter. That's when I think about, and her name is Antoinette. They call her Aunt in the book. Her name's Antoinette, but she was a bit of inspiration for this character. Now, sometimes I wouldn't. It's a great character, so I don't mind saying that out loud. Like she's one of the strongest characters in the book, and she's very very funny and stubborn and precocious, and just I really enjoyed writing her. But as I think about it now, I'm like, oh yeah, I was almost at first accidentally, like subconsciously drawing from that relationship, and she started to say some things in the book that I was like, oh, that's just like Maya, which is really weird, but you kind of get into it to that level where you're like, these are real characters, but you're always drawing from people around you, and sometimes, a lot of times, you just don't want to make them exactly like people in your real life, because you don't. I mean, you can't do that, you know, and you shouldn't do that, but you can't help but draw from what you know, right?
So I know this is a podcast we do for our church, and a few people from the outside also listen to this and will probably watch this. But speaking to our church, like, what do you want them to know about this book? How can they support you? How can they understand this project and why you're doing it? Yeah.
I think some of those things we just kind of talked about here, like, it'd be great if they bought it. but also I want them to know where it's coming from, you know, like, so I think this is important, and we don't get on Sunday mornings or during a church service, we don't get a chance to like talk like this or share. And I think it was important for both of us to be able to say, hey, it's coming from a heart of like, I want to utilize the gifts I have. I want to honor God with it. I want to connect people to what I hope is a really good story and what's entertaining and engaging. And I also want them to be able to explore some deeper level truths in it, without expecting it to be. I mean, it's not a Bible study. It's not a nonfiction Christian book. I just haven't spent time yet, at least writing those. There's a lot of amazing authors out there, and a lot of great people we both read that are impactful in the nonfiction side of spiritual life things, and I value those highly. But I've just so far have chosen to kind of focus on the fiction world, and because I feel like there's such a need for solid, good fiction in this category, and so that's what I would say, and I would ask them, like, hey, pray for us, and I appreciate your encouragement and your feedback.
When does it come out?
Okay, May 28th is the publication date this year, so they can pre-order on Amazon or anywhere else. They can pre-order on the HarperCollins Thomas Nelson website. Can pre-order at Target and Walmart.com and Barnes & Noble and all these places. It's already out there for pre-order. So,
I mean, I think I'll just add this because I really knew when I came to Love Like Norman, I knew you were a writer, and I just I know that you never use your platform to, like, I don't want to sell something, so to speak, but also at the same point, like, I resonated with the fact that you were a creative, and that's one of the reasons I stay there, because you have and I showed up after week, I just sat in the seats, but I knew this guy created stuff and has that creative spirit. And I knew that you and I would align because we have to, as creatives, you have to scratch that itch. If not, I feel like you just dry up. And when you finish something, it's just like you can finally breathe, like you have it out. And I think that's just a great thing. I'm proud of you as your friend.
I appreciate that. Well, you've been like, seriously, and I'm not just saying this because we're recording this, but you've been a great encouragement to me along the way creatively. Like it's really fun for me to talk about that with you, and knowing that you're coming at it from a different place, but an equally, a creative place where you're trying. I mean, there's something about creating something from nothing that is pretty special and unique. And I mean, everybody's a creative. Like we could talk about that for a long time, right? Like everybody's created to create. But it's been really encouraging for me to be able to like have these side conversations almost about our different things going on and sort of spurring each other on, has been like super fun. And what an amazing thing. Like we didn't plan that we were going to put these things out at the same time. Like it's kind of cool. Like I really kind of love that. I don't know what that means exactly, but I just think, man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm glad it's not that we're both putting out albums the same week. That would be kind of weird.
I didn't tell you about my album.
I have a book, actually, I was going to talk about in the next podcast.
Okay, we'll do that the next one.
But thanks for your time, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing your heart. And Love Lake Norman, check it out.